Hi, friends. We are going to read chapters 20 and 21 today. The British ships have arrived at the very end of chapter 19. Isabel thinks that Madame was watching Ruth and probably displeased that she just put a bunch of the dirty rocks into the wash basin with the tablecloth. And we were left with the last sentence, her thinking in her head, we must escape soon. All right, and this is a letter from John Hancock, President of the Continental Congress, to General George Washington. The Congress have judged it necessary to dissolve the connection between Great Britain and the American colonies and to declare them free and independent states. As you will perceive by the enclosed declaration, I am directed to request you have it proclaimed at the head of the army in the way you shall think most proper. That week unspooled slowly with hot days and muggy, breathless nights. Militia units from the surrounding colonies piled into the city. Ordinary folks skedaddled out of it as fast as their horse or feet would carry them. The extra soldiers were not the cleanest sort, or maybe they were too busy drilling and making gunpowder cartridges to wash. Whatever the cause, New York soon smelled like garbage pit mixed with a fresh mountain of manure. The stench cooked under the midsummer sun. Madame's moods changed with the tide. One moment she floated on clouds of fancy, imagining her grand life once the British beat the rebels. Next, she fell into melancholy, grumbling about the lazy British commanders floating at anchor off Staten Island, observing New York through long spyglasses, but making no move to invade. She now carried with her brocade pouch suspended from a red satin cord. Within the pouch lay a green flask filled with a calming elixir prescribed by the doctor. He advised her to drink from it whenever the need arose. She also took to walking around the house in her stocking feet, trying to catch me unawares as I scrubbed or dusted or polished, often with Ruth at my side. She said nothing during these encounters, but watched us with hungry hawk eyes. It unnerved me. The week after Hickey's hanging, Becky suffered a mild attack of the egg that had befallen so many soldiers. She grew pale and sweaty, but did not require purging or leeches. In her stead, I went to the market. Our needs were fewer now that we no longer fed the master and his companions. 'Twas a good thing, for farmers were afeared to come into the city, and there was less to choose from. More people fled every day, including the wives of General Washington and Colonel Knox and Brigadier Greene. Her that folks said was such a big flirt. I searched for Curzon every day, but Bellingham's affairs kept him out of sight. I was afraid to seek out Colonel Regan, afraid that word would get back to Madame and our lives would be put in jeopardy. 10 days after the British flooded the river with their ships, news that the Congress had declared independence arrived in New York. The declaration was read to the troops from the steps of City Hall. The men cheered so loud it seemed to shake the whole island. I hurried from the egg cellar to see the cause of the commotion. The cheering men danced and marched down Broadway, tossing their hats into the air and shouting across the river at silent ships of England. They gathered into a mob on the Bowling Green around the massive statue of King George III. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, hoping for a glimpse of Curzon or a soldier familiar from my visit to the battery. The king was mounted on his horse, and the horse mounted on a white marble pedestal that rose to the height of 3 men standing one atop the other. Both the horse and the man were fashioned larger than could be possible, but I suppose that was the way of kings. They were both made of gold that sometimes glittered in the sunlight, but dulled when the clouds interfered. Ropes appeared as if conjured, thick ropes used for tying ships to the docks. The men cheered louder and worked together to throw the ropes over the king and his horse and tie them tightly. 1, 2, 3, heave! 1, 2, 3, heave! The men strained their arms and backs. Boys on the edge of the crowd jumped up and down. Common folks stood froze at the sight of a king being pulled down by the strength of the men working together. 1, 2, 3, heave! The statue toppled, slowly at first, then gaining speed as the weight fell from the sky to the ground. The men scrambled out of the way, no one wishing to be crushed by a fallen king. As it crashed, they shouted even louder and swarmed over the thing. Axes were called for and rushed out of workshops and up from the barracks. A half dozen men took to chopping the king and his steed to bits. I inched closer. How could they be chopping through a statue with simple axes? A piece of tail broke off, and a soldier held it up for all to see. The king was not made of gold, but of soft lead, covered with gilt paint. The crowd shouted again as another soldier lifted the king's head freshly removed from his neck. A fife and drum corps started playing just beyond the mob, piping out the song usually heard during a tar and feathering party. The men made short work of King George. When the statue was reduced into pieces that could be easily carted off, they did just that. The plan was to melt down all the lead into bullets. "We'll fire Majesty at the redcoats," joked a man with a booming voice. "Aye," said his companion, shouldering an axe. Examination emanations from Leaden George will make deep impressions on the enemy. As the crowd marched off to make bullets and celebrate liberty and independence in the taverns, I realized dark was fast falling and I had tarried overly long. I picked up a sliver of lead that lay in the street. It was fringed with gilt, my own piece of Majesty. Tyrants beware, I thought as I put it in my pocket. I was surprised to see the front parlor windows alight when I walked down Wall Street. "Is the master back?" I asked Becky. She was dozing in the chair by the kitchen fire with a red checked shawl around her shoulders, still worn down from her illness. Becky yawned and stretched. "Far from it. Madame paid a call on the Reverend's wife after supper. Came down with high color in her cheeks and a bee in her bonnet. 'Dress the child,' she says. 'Make sure both of the girls eat something nourishing and sweet.'" "Did she fall and hit her head?" I asked, setting down the basket of eggs. Becky laughed. "I think the Mrs. Reverend served her a dose of scripture, the hard kind. Madame says, 'I've been too harsh on my servants. I must mend my ways or the Lord will punish me.'" I was confuddled. She's being kind to Ruth again? Becky stood slowly, wincing from the aches in her bones. "Surely so." Ruth lit up like a lantern when she saw them fancy clothes again, promised to be as quiet as ever, made short work of the gingerbread Madame baked too. This was too much. I sat down at the table. "Madame baked?" "She's a fair hand in the kitchen when she puts her mind to it. Left the dishes for yours truly, but the cake was tasty. Those 2 pieces are for you." She was most firm about it. She stopped to cough up what looked like a large wet worm from her throat. "She cooked up sweet milk for you too, with nutmeg, cinnamon, and sugar. Said you was to have some with your gingerbread." I sniffed the pitcher. It smelled good enough. "Did you have any?" "Not with this cough. Milk would stop up my lungs." I looked around the kitchen. "Where's Ruth now?" Becky unpinned her apron and folded it, then tied on her bonnet, preparing to go home. "Madame got it in her head to play cards this eve. Has 2 companions in with her, the Mrs. Drinkwater and her daughter, the one who's to marry some sort of lord or duke or some such. Ruth is in with them. She was right cheered after the cake and milk." "Should I take anything in?" "I just come from there. Madame was most definite. Tell Sal to enjoy her cake and a night off. She has worked hard these weeks and could do with a good night's sleep." "She called me Sal instead of girl?" I asked, "and you are full certain she didn't hit her head today?" Becky laughed, and the laugh caught in her throat and bubbled into a cough. "Look here. She's likely to turn back into a sour old cow by breakfast, so I say, have a good sit down and enjoy a little peace." I poured a mug of the milk. Huzzah for the Reverend's wife. I wanted to savor the gingerbread bite by bite and sip the milk slowly, but I couldn't help myself. The mug was drained and the plate empty soon after Becky left. The milk was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted, the spices so thick I could near chew them. No wonder Ruth was cheered by it. I washed up my dishes, tidied the kitchen, and found myself with idle hands, a rare event indeed. Could sneak into the library and borrow that Crusoe book. I could read by the fire with a mending basket nearby to slip the book into should Madame approach. That seemed a fine plan. But first I wanted to shed my bodice. It pinched something awful under my arms. I felt my way down the cellar stairs with my toes and heard the sound of laughter from Madame's company. I yawned. When would they leave? And what sort of ladies came to call this late? I removed my bodice and hung it on a nail. The pallet looked soothing and cool, and the thought of climbing the stairs again made me weary. But I would like to read a few more pages. But I was overly fatigued. But Mr. Crusoe was facing all sorts of dangers. But in betwixt one thought and the next, I fell asleep. For that, I shall never forgive myself. Ooh. Chapter 21. And this is another advertisement. It's in the New York Gazette and Weekly Mercury newspaper. To be sold at the office of William Tongue, broker, at the house of the late Mr. Waldron, near the Exchange, lower end of Broad Street, the following goods and merchandise. One Negro wench, 22 years old, has had smallpox, is a useful domestic, price 80 something. One Negro boy, 16 years old, price 90. One Negro wench, 30 years old, with or without her son, 5 years old, price 60 or 80. In my dream, I stood on a sandy beach, my back to the sea, the moon over my left shoulder. An enormous map was unrolled at my feet. The roads on it were marked with velvet black ink, rivers a pearly blue and mountains a speckled green. It was a map of a country I'd never seen. Just as I opened my mouth to call for Ruth, who always tagged along in my dreams, a thick mist blew over the beach. The roads on the map twined and twisted round each other, hesitating, then rose up off the paper, no longer roads, but thick eels with amber eyes. They crawled out of the map, and I feared they would bite me. They pondered me a moment, then slithered down the beach and into the water. I awoke with a start and flung aside the blanket, looking for the eels. There were none there, nor in the potato bin. Ruth wasn't there neither, and her side of our pallet was cold. She was gone to the privy, no doubt. I needed to visit the same place. The sun was already in the trees when I stepped outside. How had I slept so late? Ruth, I called, walking toward the little building. My nose wrinkled. The Locktons would soon need to dig a new privy hole. Ruth, I knocked on the door and it swung open. The seat was empty, with a few flies buzzing in the stench. 2 blue jays in the sycamore tree called loudly. There was a distant sound of officers shouting orders on Broadway and the clatter of cartwheels, but no Ruth. I made quick work of looking in the yard. The back entry to the stables was locked. She could not have gone out that way. The gate to the street was closed too, and the latch too high for Ruth to reach. Had Madame already dressed her, taken her on a call? A thought slid through me, quick and slimy as a cold eel. I ran for the kitchen door. Becky! Becky! She came out of the pantry as I flew through the door. Where's Ruth? Oh, Becky looked down at the worn tips of her shoes, then turned away from me. Her eyes were puddled up and red rimmed. I can't find her, I said. She was gone when I woke. Have you seen her? Becky took the jar of flour down from the shelf. You know where she is, don't you? She removed the lid and stuck the scoop into the flour. Tell me. Becky shook her head from side to side. I should have started this bread earlier, she said, pouring the flour into the bowl. The wet air will ruin the loaves. That's my concern. I should have stayed and baked in the cool of the night. She dabbed her eyes on her sleeve and measured out another scoop of flour. But Madame sent me home, said she wanted a quiet house last night, no baking. She looked at me over her shoulder. The eel squeezed out all my air. No, I said. I wouldn't have gone if I'd known. No, no, no. I backed away, shaking my head. She didn't. She wouldn't. No. Isabel, don't. Becky followed me down the hall, trying to control her voice. It won't change anything. What's done is done. Ruth, I screamed up the staircase. Stop, Isabel. Becky grabbed my arm and pulled me backward, clamping a flour-covered hand over my mouth. You can't storm around here like a banshee. Madame will beat you bloody. Me too. I pushed her hand away and wiped off the flour. Where is she? What did they do to her? She's gone, Becky said. Gone, I repeated. Gone where? Becky studied her shoes again. Sold. I stopped hearing right. No more birds or buzzing flies or grandfather clock marking time. Sold, I repeated. No, she's not. They didn't. Becky's eyes filled again. Yes, she said quietly. She did. I paced the hall. No, I slept too heavy last night. Didn't notice when she woke. She wandered outside. We need to find her. She could be lost, could have taken ill and fallen. Becky watched me go to and fro. The sweet milk Madame made up, I figured it contained a sleep potion, knocked you out cold so they could spirit her away. I'm dreadful, powerful sorry, but they sold her away from you. It made no sense. I would have known. I would have woken up, fought them off, killed whoever tried to take her from me. I took care of Ruth. I promised Mama I always would. Becky's face shrank down to the size of a coin. It sounded like she spoke through a long wooden pipe. Madame was returning in the carriage when I arrived this morning, she said. Told me not to worry about the milk spoiling no more, that Ruth was headed to Nevis, sold to a physician's family. I shook my head, trying to clear my brain pan. Where's Nevis? How do I get there? Becky's face grew larger. You need to sit down. I'll get a cloth for your head. This has been a right shock to you. Where's Nevis? My voice echoed off the walls. West Indies, Becky muttered. The islands? All of Mama's terrible stories of slave life in the islands flooded back. Ruth can't cut cane. She'll die. She'll die in a day. My feet started for the front door. Wait, Becky grabbed my arm to prevent me from running off. I questioned Madame about that very fact, questioned her right close I did. Not to cut cane, said she, but to be a housemaid in a fine house, a physician's house, so they'll care for her should she fall. She's lying, I said. She's a spiteful, hateful liar. A door opened on the second floor. Becky, Madame asked, has someone come to call? No, ma'am, Becky said in a false, high voice. Madame came down the stairs, one hand on the railing, the other holding a sheet of paper half covered with writing. The paintings of her dead ancestors on the wall watched her. I do not appreciate interruptions when I'm communicating with my husband, she said. What is the matter here? Nothing, ma'am, Becky stuttered. I was giving the girl her directions for the morning. Madame looked down without seeing me. She looked at my face, my kerchief, my shift neatly tucked into my skirt, looked at my shoes pinching my feet, looked at my hands that were stronger than hers. She did not look into my eyes, did not see the lion inside. She did not see the me of me, the Isabel. I saw her. I saw all the way down to her withered soul. I walked up 2 steps. Did you sell Ruth? You will not address me in that insolent manner. Her voice shook a little. Becky wrung her hands. Come, Isabel, you need to peel the potatoes. Would Madame like some tea or coffee? I took another step up. Answer me, you miserable cow. Did you sell my sister? Madame backed up a step. Her letters fluttered to the bottom of the stairs. Her ancestors hung silent. Stay away from me, she said. Get back to the kitchen. She is 5 years old. I rose another step. She is a baby, and you sold her away from me. She swallowed hard. Her hands quivered. I wanted to grab her by the hair and throw her down the stairs, throw her out a window, beat her face with my fists. I wanted her blood to splash the paintings, soak the wall and the wooden stairs. Isabel, Becky warned. The sunlight coming through the window was rosy red. I took the next step. I was almost close enough to reach her. Isabel, Becky tried again. One more step and I can have you hung, Madame whispered. I held my breath. There was a click of metal on metal. Becky had opened the front door wide. A hot wind from the street rose up the stairs, fluttering our skirts and causing me to turn. Madame grabbed a painting from the wall and threw it down on my head. I raised my arm too late and the frame crashed into me. The blow made me addlepated and weakened my knees. Madame ran upstairs, screaming like a house afire. Becky dragged me down the steps and shoved me toward the open door. Run, she screamed. I ran out the front door for the first time. People walking under the shade of the sycamores across the street paused at the sight of a slave running away from a mansion where a woman was screaming. A man called after me. You there, girl. I ran straight down wall. Didn't worry about escaping notice of soldiers or strangers, just flew over the cobblestones as fast as I could. The red fog slowly rolled out of my mind. There were more shouts behind me, and people turning to stare at the cause of the commotion. I didn't dare take the time to turn around. Past City Hall, cross Broadway, I leapt over the remains of a sentry fire, bumped into a gray-bearded soldier wearing a homespun shirt, and startled a man carrying 2 live hens by the feet. One of the hens broke free in an explosion of feathers. The man shook his fist and called out for someone to stop me. I ducked down one street after another, trying to find a way to the river, but the army had erected barricades at the end of most of the roads to keep out the British. I was penned in. The shouts behind me grew louder and closer. I darted down an alley, turning blindly toward the right, and then ran smack into the barrel chest of a giant. Whoa there, young filly, a deep voice boomed. Don't want to go swimming in the river, do you? I had run straight into a blacksmith. Please, sir, I said. His enormous hands released me, and I looked over my shoulder. Looking to get away from someone, I suspect? The blacksmith said. Behind him billowed the coal smoke from the forge. The air was filled with the hot tang of metal and sweat. You're hurt, child, the blacksmith said, and needed some help? I wanted to spill out my story and to trust he could advise me, but he was a stranger. They were all strangers, and Ruth was gone, and there was blood on my forehead from the painting Madame threw at me, and she was going to see me hung, and I'd never be able to rescue Ruth, and she'd be all alone, and tell them I went north, I gasped, as I picked up my skirts and darted around to the forge to the south. The blacksmith called after me, but his words were lost in the din of the soldiers and sailors who cluttered my path. The wind off the river cooled my face and helped with my decision. I would turn myself over to the rebels. I'd helped them fair and square. Now it was their turn. We were all fighting for liberty. Ad Astra, I shouted. The words were not as magic as I had hoped, but the door eventually opened. Colonel Regan was sitting in a chair, a white cloth around his neck, his face covered with foamy soap and his eyes closed. Behind him stood a barber, a slave, I assumed because of his African skin, with grizzled hair and an apron. On the table beside him stood a bowl of steamy water, a leather strop for blades, and a cup of lather with a brush in it. He turned the colonel's chin with one finger, then delicately shaved away a stripe of soap with a razor. By your leave, sir, said the sentry. I am busy, the colonel said, without opening his eyes. This girl knew the password, insisted on seeing you, the sentry continued. The barber scraped off another stripe of soap and whiskers. Take her to Jameson, the colonel said. No, I said. The barber froze in mid-shave, and the colonel opened his eyes. Please, sir, you must help me, I said quickly, as I once helped you. She sold my sister. Please, sir, I'll do anything. Just find Ruth. She's so small, and the door behind us opened. Two more sentries filed in, followed by Madame Lockton, breathing hard, and a tall gentleman I'd not seen before. My sentry waved me farther into the room so that the newcomers might all fit. I worked my way toward an open window. What is the meaning of this? The colonel asked wearily. Madame's voice cracked across the room. Are you the man in charge? The colonel sighed deeply, waved off the barber, and stood up, his face still half covered with soap. Colonel Thomas Regan at your service, ma'am. He bowed stiffly from the waist. How can I be of service? You have stolen my property, Madame announced. We have several clerks assigned to record civilian concerns. My sergeant will show you. I will not speak with subordinates or grubby clerks. That chit of a girl belongs to me, Colonel. She has committed terrible crimes and must be punished. I demand you return her to me. The barber rinsed the razor in the water bowl. Regan looked from Madame to me and back again. What did she do? She abused me most violently, sir. The colonel put out his hand and the barber placed a clean towel in it. Yet it is the girl with blood on her face, the colonel said, wiping away the soap from his chin and cheeks. Madame's eyes narrowed. Give her to me. The sentries shifted their boots to the floor. One cleared his throat. The gentleman who accompanied Madame stepped forward. The law is quite clear on this matter, sir. None of us want to live in a world where servants rule their masters. Both the Parliament and the Congress give Madame Lockton rule over her slave. A flock of crows swooped past the window. A three-masted ship, sails unfurled, pushed down the river. Ruth could be on it, or she was already at sea, in a dark hold with no candles. Who would feed her? Who would hold her when she shook? The girl says you've sold her sister, Colonel Regan said. Do you mean to purchase Sal for the army? Madame asked. I'm sure she'd make a passing fine washwoman. I shall expect full payment in cash. He handed the towel back to the barber. A washwoman is the one thing I don't need right now. If you had any manservants capable of ditch digging, I'd take you up on the offer. But he paused and shook his head. I looked out the window again. One crow had come back. It landed on a carcass near the water's edge, a dead dog or a rat. The crow pecked at the meat of the thing, snatched a pink strip in his beak, and tugged until the piece broke away. He beat his wings once, twice, and flew up in the air, enough to catch a breeze that rode him out over the water. Another man had entered the room. The night of my first visit to the fort, he had worn his uniform coat over his nightshirt. Now his coat was properly buttoned and his breeches tucked into his boots. Thomas, we cannot interfere, he said. This girl is not our concern, and you are late. We dare not keep him waiting. I looked out the window at the carcass. Please, sir, I said in a quiet voice, let me stay. Colonel Regan fastened his collar without looking at me. The law binds my hands and my actions. You must return with your mistress, he said, concentrating on his task. Even during time of war, we must follow the rules of propriety, and civilization. With that, the matter was concluded. Madame turned to thank the man who aided her. The sentry slipped into the hall. Colonel Regan picked up his hat from the table and set it on his head. As I stepped toward the window, the barber studied me close. He shook his head once from side to side, just as Jenny had back in Rhode Island 100 years ago. Bad advice on both occasions. I bolted for the open window. I almost made it. A lot happened in those two chapters. Get your jots done. Looking forward to discussing And we'll talk about chapters 20 and 21 tomorrow. Thanks.